Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the fascinating depths of history, exploring stories that might make you scratch your head and wonder, or just outright amaze you. From the beefy, brainy Homo Neanderthalensis to Tomoe Gozen, a Japanese warrior woman whose sword was sharper than any gossip, and even ancient sailors who navigated oceans without GPS. These are the unsung heroes who not only survived but shook the world in their own unique ways. So, before you get comfortable, grab your popcorn and make sure your internet connection is solid. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine this. You take a casual stroll into Ice Age Europe, say 80,000 years ago. You'd probably freeze solid within 30 seconds. But before that happened, you might catch a glimpse of a Neanderthal, the local apex hominin who looked like they could beat a mammoth in a wrestling match. These weren't just cavemen, folks. They were nature's ultimate survivors, optimized for punishment, designed by a committee of bodybuilders, Arctic engineers, and someone who really liked forehead real estate. Neanderthals were shorter than us on average, around 5 feet 4 inches to 5 feet 6 inches. But don't let short fool you. They weren't small. They were condensed powerhouses, stocky frames, huge rib cages, broad shoulders, and a build so sturdy it looked like their skeletons had been reinforced for demolition work. Their bones were thick, dense, and frankly, overqualified for anything less than full-contact mammoth takedowns. Their short, powerful limbs helped conserve heat, and their massive hands with strong thumbs were perfect for crafting tools, grabbing prey, or presumably opening pickle jars that modern humans wouldn't even attempt. And their faces? Neanderthals didn't look weird. We look weird. Their prominent brow ridges could have doubled as ski jumps, and their large, forward-facing noses probably acted as a built-in heater for that frosty Ice Age air. But make no mistake, these weren't brutish thugs or failed prototypes. This was a parallel success story, the elite endurance athletes of their day. Every inch of them screamed, "Yes, I've broken several ribs. No, I don't regret it." If you've ever felt proud of your bone density after lifting a milk jug without hurting yourself, sit down. Neanderthals were walking fortresses. The biggest surprise? Their brains were actually bigger than ours. About 1,500 cubic centimeters compared to our modern average of 1,350 cubic centimeters. That's right, the so-called brute cavemen were walking around with high-performance cranial engines, and they didn't even have spreadsheets to suffer through. While bigger doesn't automatically mean smarter. A blue whale has a massive brain and has yet to invent indoor plumbing. Neanderthals put their brains to good use. A large portion of their brain volume went towards sensory processing and motor skills, especially vision and movement coordination, which makes perfect sense when your daily schedule involves stalking elk in a snowstorm and not accidentally walking off a cliff. They were also masters of climate resilience. Their compact bodies conserved heat, their huge noses pre-warmed frigid air, and their likely lighter skin helped synthesize vitamin D during long periods of gloom. Their enormous lungs fueled bodies that were doing manual labor 24/7. And their clothing? Not just for loincloths. Evidence suggests Neanderthals wore stitched hides using bone needles. Imagine, they were hand-sewing outfits from deer and mammoth skins before buttons were even a concept, and they didn't even complain about it on Reddit. Believe it or not, they even had a sense of fashion. Sites show pierced shells, feathers, and eagle talons, things that served no obvious practical function. This implies they liked a little flair, maybe some symbolism, perhaps even some Ice Age swagger. Picture a Neanderthal strutting into camp like, "Yes, this claw necklace is real. Yes, I caught the bird myself. No, you may not touch it." They also used red ochre on tools, bodies, and possibly faces. Was it war paint? Decoration? Early makeup? Nobody knows for sure, But it means at some point, a Neanderthal looked at a red rock and said, "This would look incredible on my cheekbones." Their strength? They weren't just strong. They were punch a woolly rhino in the face strong. The kind of strength that makes you wonder if physics worked differently back then, or if they were just born with a natural gym membership to the universe. Estimates suggest a Neanderthal male could be up to 50% stronger than a modern human of the same size. Their hunting style was close contact. They'd run up to angry Ice Age megafauna and jab them with spears at near point-blank range. Their version of dinner prep involved dodging tusks, while keeping a firm grip on something that wanted them dead. And the wear and tear? Oh, it shows. Their fossil records are full of healed injuries. Broken arms, crushed ribs, damaged skulls. All signs that they weren't just strong, but incredibly resilient. Their trauma patterns are strikingly similar to those found in professional rodeo riders. So, next time you trip on a rug and feel sorry for yourself, remember Neanderthals spent their lives getting tackled by Ice Age death machines, shrugged it off with some moss and fire, and still lived long enough to invent personal grooming. Now, that's resilience. They were also masters of fire. They knew how to make, maintain, and even weaponize it. Archaeological sites reveal clear evidence of hearths. They used fire for cooking, which made food easier to chew and digest, unlocking more nutrients. They also used it for tool making, heating flint to make it easier to shape, and of course for defense. Fire scared predators, offering warmth, light, and a makeshift force field against anything that growled in the dark. They didn't flaunt it, they just quietly turned cold caves into livable homes and meat into slightly less chewy meat. Their tools weren't just sharp rocks. They were strategically crafted instruments made with attention to detail. Their primary technique, the Levallois method, was a complicated multi-step process that required planning ahead, shaping cores, analyzing angles, and executing cuts with such finesse that modern archaeologists sometimes mistake their work for early Homo sapiens craftsmanship. Talk about annoying for the archaeologists. Most profoundly, they had culture. For years, it was assumed Neanderthals didn't do art. That was our thing. Then, we found cave paintings in Spain made with red ochre over 64,000 years ago, before modern humans even showed up in Europe. That awkward silence you hear is anthropology professors reevaluating everything they once said with confidence. They also collected decorative objects like pierced shells, feathers, and eagle talons, things that served no obvious practical function, implying they cared about more than just survival. There's even a mysterious cave structure found deep underground in France, made from broken stalagmites arranged into rings. No sunlight, no apparent use, no graffiti. Just Neanderthals 176,000 years ago building in the dark like they were summoning something, or maybe just being wonderfully weird. And yes, they had language. They had the hyoid bone, crucial for speech, and genes related to language processing. So they may not have written poetry, but it's safe to say they weren't just grunting. Somewhere, a Neanderthal once looked at another and said something meaningful. Probably about meat, but still meaningful. Now let's talk about what you're really curious about. Yes, Neanderthals and modern humans got together. Romantically, biblically, DNA testably. When early Homo sapiens migrated into Europe and Asia around 60,000 years ago, they ran into the locals, the Neanderthals. And rather than treating them like distant cousins at a wedding, they did the evolutionary equivalent of asking, "You up?" with zero irony. We know this happened because it's written in our genes, literally. Most people of non-African descent today carry about 1 to 4% Neanderthal DNA. That means somewhere in your ancestry, one of your very great-grandparents had an Ice Age date night that got out of hand. Was it love? A survival strategy? A prehistoric version of, well, the gene pool's not that big? Scientists are still debating. Interestingly, this wasn't just a one-time fluke. Genetic evidence shows that interbreeding happened multiple times in different places over thousands of years. So clearly, it wasn't just one confused Homo sapiens at a very dark cave party. While this mixing didn't result in a blended superspecies, the Neanderthals eventually disappeared, but parts of them live on in us. Your slightly wide nose could be a Neanderthal gift. Your love of red meat and aversion to cardio? Also suspicious. So, before you laugh at Neanderthals for their giant brows or suspicious fashion choices, you should probably check your ancestry report. Because statistically speaking, you might be part Neanderthal. No offense, it's science. Thanks to genome sequencing, we now know this ancient inheritance isn't just a quirky footnote. It shows up in real ways. Neanderthal genes have been linked to traits involving skin tone, hair texture, immune response, and even pain sensitivity. So if you sunburn easily, react strangely to allergens, or stub your toe and feel like you've been shot, you may have a Neanderthal edition of human firmware. There's even evidence that Neanderthal DNA affects how people sleep, process fat, and respond to certain medications. So while your ancient cousins might have helped you survive a woolly mammoth ambush, they might also be partly responsible for your impulse to buy snacks and doomscroll at 2 a.m. Neanderthals thrived for nearly 300,000 years, surviving ice ages, saber-toothed predators, and each other. They were the original Europeans, the true locals. And then, roughly 40,000 years ago, they vanished. Quietly. No dramatic extinction event, no comet. Just a fade to black, like they missed a memo about sticking around for the Holocene. So what happened? One theory is climate change. As the last ice age began shifting, Neanderthals struggled to adapt to new environments. Their hunting grounds changed, large game became scarce, and even mammoths started acting dramatic. For a group built to dominate the cold, warming weather was less summer vibes and more existential crisis. Another theory is competition with Homo sapiens. When modern humans arrived in Europe, they brought things like long-distance weapons, more varied diets, and that extremely annoying habit of surviving everywhere. They reproduced faster, traveled farther, and possibly talked more, which in a species contest count for a lot. It's also likely that Neanderthal populations were smaller and more isolated, meaning less genetic diversity. A serious problem when every winter is a survival game show and your neighbors are reproducing like it's a competitive sport. Yet, this wasn't a violent takeover. There's no massive evidence of genocide or battles. If anything, Neanderthals and humans coexisted for thousands of years, traded DNA, shared ideas, and probably some awkward campfire conversations. They slowly blended until there weren't any pure Neanderthal populations left. The last known Neanderthals likely lived in southern Iberia, places like Gibraltar, where they held on for a few thousand years more, like the final flickers of a candle. The archaeological record goes quiet. No new tools, no new burials, just stillness. But this wasn't a failure. It was a chapter, and one that left a permanent mark. Neanderthals didn't go out with a bang, but their influence lives on, not in monuments or scrolls, but in DNA, in bones, in blood. They weren't erased, they were absorbed. Now, let's pivot to the war-torn twilight of Japan's Heian period. The battlefield was no place for a woman, and yet that's precisely where Tomoe Gozen belonged. Imagine a sea of armored men clashing steel in the dust and chaos of war, and among them, one lone figure stands out. Not because she was out of place, but because she was more skilled, more fearless, and more precise than most of the warriors around her. Tomoe Gozen wasn't just some camp follower or noble lady playing at war. She was a trained warrior, an onna musha, female samurai, from the province of Echigo. From a young age, she was taught to ride, to shoot a bow from horseback, and to wield a katana with such ferocity that she left men twice her size bleeding in the dirt. Her loyalty lay with Minamoto Yoshinaka, a prominent general. But make no mistake, Tomoe wasn't merely his bodyguard or ornament. She was his commander, his equal, his enforcer. Contemporary accounts describe her as a remarkably beautiful woman with white skin, long hair, and charming features. But the compliments didn't stop at her looks. They spoke of her strength, her uncanny skill in archery, and her unmatched swordsmanship. This wasn't poetry or court gossip. It was battlefield fact. She could break through ranks, decapitate a foe mid-gallop, and keep riding without so much as a misstep. Tomoe Gozen was a storm in human form. The timing of her rise was no coincidence. Japan was being torn apart in the Genpei War, a civil conflict between the Minamoto and Taira clans. Tomoe didn't just fight. She commanded troops, she won battles, she carried heads back to camp like any warrior proving their kill. And most of all, she defied the carefully drawn lines of what womanhood was supposed to look like in 12th century Japan. Tomoe Gozen wasn't an exception. She was a revelation, a warning, and a legend in the making. Before Tomoe Gozen ever tasted battle, she had to master survival in a world built to exclude her. Feudal Japan was steeped in hierarchy, honor, and hard lines, especially for women. Daughters of samurai were expected to be polite, loyal, and quiet. But Tomoe's early life was anything but conventional. Her training would have been brutal. Swordsmanship wasn't just about strength. It was about timing, control, and reading your opponent. She would have trained in kenjutsu, sword work, and kyujitsu, archery, all while learning to fight in heavy armor and manage a warhorse in full gallop. She likely also learned the naginata, a curved blade polearm traditionally associated with female warriors. But make no mistake, this wasn't some symbolic ceremonial practice. This was preparation for real violence. Tomoe's fighting style combined elegance and lethality, and she didn't just keep up with the men, she often surpassed them. By the time Tomoe Gozen reached adulthood, Japan was on the brink of collapse. The Genpei War erupted in 1180. Tomoe was right in the thick of it. Her lord, Minamoto Yoshinaka, wanted control over Kyoto and the entire country. And when war broke out, he didn't hesitate, with Tomoe right beside him. She wasn't just a token warrior. Tomoe led troops into battle. She made strategic decisions, and when the fighting got bloody, she was at the front lines, blade drawn, giving orders most men wouldn't dare to question. She was a symbol of Yoshinaka's audacity, his willingness to defy tradition and win by any means necessary. One of Tomoe's most famous victories came during the Battle of Yokotegawara, where she reportedly led a charge that decimated enemy forces. Chronicles claimed she personally took the heads of several samurai and presented them as trophies. It wasn't for vanity, it was for proof. Every kill was a receipt, every had a message. However, power is a double-edged blade. As Yoshinaka gained power, tensions rose with Yoritomo, who saw his cousin's ambition as a threat. The Minamoto Civil War had begun, and Tomoe Gozen was now fighting not against the Taira, but against her own clan. What followed was a rapid, tragic descent. Yoshinaka found himself outmaneuvered and outnumbered. He retreated from Kyoto with only a handful of loyal retainers, including Tomoe. They made their final stand at the Battle of Awazu in early 1184. As the enemy closed in, Tomoe fought like a demon unleashed. Chronicles say she charged into the enemy lines, found the strongest warrior she could, and promptly decapitated him before riding back through the carnage. It wasn't just skill, it was a message. Even in defeat, she wouldn't be erased. After the blood-soaked snows of Awazu, Tomoe Gozen vanished from the official records, as if she rode straight off the battlefield and into myth. No historian can say with certainty what happened to her, and perhaps that's fitting. Warriors like Tomoe weren't supposed to survive. They were supposed to die with their lord, their sword, and their honor. But Tomoe, she may have chosen something far more rebellious: to live. The Heike Monogatari, our main source on Tomoe's life, offers conflicting stories. One claims she was captured and forced to marry one of Yoritomo's generals. Another tale claims she cut off her long warrior's hair, assumed a new identity, and vanished into the mountain monasteries of Nagano, never to be seen again. Yet another version hints that she continued to wander the countryside as a ronin, an unaligned warrior hired for private vengeance and borderland skirmishes. And then silence. Centuries of it. The truth buried somewhere under folklore, scrolls, and oral tales may never surface. But Tomoe's vanishing act became part of her power. By slipping out of history, she became immortal. She was no longer constrained by one ending, one role, or one version of femininity. Instead, she became a symbol of possibility. As centuries passed, the woman once feared on the battlefield became something else entirely, a legend molded by poets, monks, and playwrights. In an era where women were expected to be invisible, Tomoe Gozen became unforgettable. The Heike Monogatari was the first to etch her into cultural memory. Through the voices of blind monks known as Biwa Hoshi who chanted war epics, Tomoe Gozen was reborn not just as a fighter, but as a tragic heroine. Later adaptations embellished her even further in No and Kabuki theater. Her beauty exaggerated, her loyalty dramatized, her battles stylized to perfection. While the real woman who decapitated enemies and led cavalry charges was gradually softened over time, her armor traded for flowing kimonos, her swordplay becoming metaphors for feminine resilience. Her image refused to die. Artists throughout the Edo period painted her riding into battle, face calm, blade poised. In modern Japan, Tomoe Gozen is often mentioned in the same breath as other legendary warriors like Musashi and Yoshitsune. But unlike them, she carries the unique weight of gender defiance. She wasn't just an exception to the rule, she was a challenge to it. In every era since, women have looked to Tomoe as proof that their place is wherever they choose to stand, even if that's the heart of the battlefield. The further she drifted from fact, the closer she became to symbol. A woman who shouldn't have existed yet did. A warrior who couldn't be contained yet endured, and a story that refused to end. Tomoe Gozen's blade may have been sheathed over 800 years ago, but her presence lingers, etched not only in legend, but in the cultural psyche of Japan and beyond. She became a symbol of resistance, individuality, and the disruptive power of a woman who refuses to follow the script. Even in politics and education, Tomoe Gozen has become shorthand for defiance. Schools are named after her. Martial arts dojos cite her in their lineage. She appears on stamps, posters, and even anime storylines. Her name invoked whenever someone needs to prove that a warrior's soul can come in any form. She may have fought one war, but her presence continues to rally people across every battle for identity, justice, and place. Tomoe Gozen never asked to be remembered. She didn't leave behind memoirs, letters, or poetic reflections. She left behind the only thing that truly mattered to a warrior of her age, a legacy forged in blood, loyalty, and fire. And in doing so, she achieved something few in history ever manage: immortality without asking for it. Unlike many women of her time, Tomoe wasn't preserved because she fit society's ideals. She was preserved because she broke them. Every time she swung her blade on a battlefield swarming with men who thought her unworthy, she rewrote the rules of feudal Japan. And though she vanished into obscurity, her absence only made her story louder. In a culture where silence often defined a woman's worth, Tomoe's silence, after Awazu, has become its own kind of roar. Today, statues of her stand in Nagano and across Japan. Schoolgirls study her in history classes, cosplayers dress as her at anime conventions, martial artists whisper her name as they train with the Naginata. She even appears in international games and series, reminding global audiences that the archetype of the female warrior isn't fiction, it's history. And yet, her greatest power may lie in the fact that we still don't fully know her. Was she a concubine turned general, a foster daughter raised in the art of war, a lone ronin who walked in the mountains and never looked back? We may never uncover the full truth, but maybe that's the point. Tomoe Gozen was never meant to be one story. She was meant to be many, not bound by records, nor erased by time, just eternally riding, sword drawn, into the legend she forged herself. Before satellites lit up the sky and compasses pointed north, ancient mariners stared out over endless horizons and asked the boldest question of all: what's out there? These weren't reckless fools. They were engineers, navigators, and dreamers. With little more than the stars overhead and the winds in their sails, they carved sea routes that would become the first arteries of global connection. Humanity's relationship with the sea began tens of thousands of years ago. Some of the earliest evidence of watercraft dates back over 40,000 years, long before the agricultural revolution. Even then, early humans were already using rafts to reach distant islands like Australia, which required crossing hundreds of miles of open ocean. These were not lucky accidents. They were planned journeys made with a clear understanding of tides, winds, and celestial patterns. By 300 BCE, maritime technology was flourishing. These early seafarers faced enormous challenges. No maps, no written instructions, and often no guarantee they'd ever return. And yet they went, driven by necessity, curiosity, and survival. They read the waves like a book. They observed how clouds formed over islands, how birds flew at certain times of day, and how the stars rotated across the sky. The night sky, in particular, became their greatest tool. Polaris in the northern hemisphere, for instance, served as a fixed point for orientation. In the southern hemisphere, navigators watched the Southern Cross. These seafarers learned to feel the subtle push of currents beneath their hulls. They learned the sound of the wind in their sails. And there you have it, an epic journey through history, from the powerful Neanderthals to the legendary Tomoe Gozen and the daring ancient mariners. I hope you enjoyed these incredible stories. If you did, please like this video, subscribe for more historical deep dives, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. What other historical figures or periods would you like to explore?